The fluorescent lights of Moretti's grocery store flickered overhead as Elena Carter stood frozen at the checkout counter. Her hands trembled as she clutched a box of infant formula. The very box she had chosen so carefully 20 minutes earlier. Checking it, then checking again, comparing the price to a bank balance that was drying up to nothing. Against her chest, Liam, 8 months old, screamed inside an old cloth carrier. His tiny fists flailed in the air. His face was flushed, raw with hunger and frustration. "I'm sorry, ma'am, but your card was declined." Tony Moretti repeated it louder, as if volume could make the moment less humiliating. The store owner's face held a mix of pity and discomfort. The line behind Elena had grown by 5 more people, and the shared sighs and shuffling feet became the soundtrack of judgment. "Can you try it again?" Elena asked. Her voice was barely a whisper. She already knew the answer. That morning, she had checked her balance, $23. The formula alone was $38. She had hoped, somehow, that the money from last week's night shift would have posted. Maybe it would be enough, but it was not. "I've tried twice already, miss," Tony said. His voice softened slightly as Liam's cries rose even higher. "Do you have another card?" Elena's throat tightened. Other shoppers were staring. She could feel their eyes drilling into her back. She could almost hear what they were thinking. Why have a baby if you cannot afford to feed him? Where is the father? Why waste everyone's time like this? "Then I have to put it back," Elena said. The words tasted like ash in her mouth. "Just the formula. I'll come back when I get paid on Friday." Friday was still 5 days away. Liam could not wait 5 days. "I'm sorry, baby," she whispered, bending to kiss the soft hair on his head. His tiny face was soaked with tears, his mouth open in another starving cry. She had used the last drop of formula that morning, scraping the bottom of the container to mix the final bottle. And as for her, she had gone without food for 2 days, guarding the last $15 for diapers and the cheapest loaf of bread she could find. When Tony began the return, scanning the formula with a beep that seemed to echo through the small store, Elena fought to hold back her tears. Outside the glass, snow had been falling steadily all afternoon, laying a white blanket over the dark south side street. She would have to wrap Liam tight and walk 6 blocks back to her miserable studio apartment, where she would somehow have to figure out how to feed her son. In a shadowed corner of the store, a tall man in a black cashmere coat watched in silence. His dark hair was cut short and neat. A faint scar crossed his left eyebrow. His storm-gray eyes missed nothing. Dominic Valencia had not come to Moretti's tonight to shop. He had come to remind Tony about a debt that was 3 months overdue. Victor was waiting outside in a black Escalade, ready for whatever needed to happen. But the plan changed the moment Dominic stepped inside. He had noticed the young woman from the first second. She stood in front of the baby aisle, carefully comparing prices with the calculator on a phone whose screen was cracked. There was something in her focus, something in the desperate determination in her eyes, that caught him. She wore a winter coat worn thin at the wrists. Her dark brown hair was tied back in a hurried knot at the nape of her neck. The baby boy in the carrier had blue eyes just like his mother. When she finally chose a box of formula and set it in her basket with a small breath of relief, Dominic found himself hoping, strangely, that she would be able to buy it. Now, watching her at the register, watching the formula scanned for return, watching the baby scream while she stood with her shoulders folded inward in defeat, Dominic felt something crack inside his chest. He had killed men. He had ordered torture. He had looked into the eyes of enemies without blinking. But that child's crying, that hungry crying, so much like his own 31 years ago, made something inside him shake. The memory came without warning. His mother, Maria Valencia, standing at a similar checkout when he was 6 years old, counting coins in her palm, rough from working too hard for too long. He sat in the cart, hungry, too young to understand why his mother cried when she had to put a box of cereal back. A stranger had stepped forward and paid for them that day. Dominic never learned the man's name, but he never forgot. That day, he swore that when he grew up, no one around him would go hungry if he could help it. Then he grew up. He became a mafia boss, and he forgot that vow, buried in blood and money, until tonight. "Tony," Dominic said. His voice cut through the noise like a blade. He stepped out of the shadows and walked toward the register. "Put it all on my account. Everything she needs." Tony Moretti went pale when he realized who had spoken. Mr. Valencia." Elena turned, her blue eyes wide with shock. She saw a tall man, broad-shouldered, in an expensive black suit beneath the cashmere coat, the scar on his eyebrow, the gray eyes, cold as steel, yet with something else buried deep inside, something that looked like old pain. "I don't need," Elena began. "Add diapers," Dominic cut in, not looking at her, his gaze still pinned on Tony. "Add more formula. Add food. Anything she and the baby need." Tony nodded quickly, hands shaking as he scanned the formula again. The people in line fell silent. no one daring to breathe too loudly. Elena stared at the stranger, her heart hammering. She had lived long enough on the South Side to recognize power when she saw it. This man was not just rich, he was dangerous. The kind of danger that made a store owner tremble at the sound of his name. But Liam was hungry, and she had no other choice. When the full bags were placed into her hands, Dominic finally looked straight into Elena's eyes. He set a black business card on the counter. There was only one line of silver text. D. Valencia Industries, and a phone number. My company is hiring office staff, he said, his voice low and steady. $4,000 a month, full benefits. On-site daycare, if you're interested. Then he turned and walked away, disappearing into the white snow outside before Elena could say a single word. She stood there, holding the bags and her son, staring at the black card in her hand. She did not know that the man who had just saved her was the most powerful mafia boss in Chicago. She did not know that he had killed someone in the back room of this very store 2 weeks earlier. And she certainly did not know that this chance meeting tonight would change her entire life forever. Sometimes, angels arrive wearing the face of a devil. And sometimes, salvation comes from the place you least expect. If this story touched your heart, please hit like to support the channel. Do not forget to share it with anyone who needs a warm story. And hit subscribe so you do not miss the next episodes full of surprises. Elena walked the full 6 blocks through thick snowfall, holding Liam tight against her chest, the heavy bags biting into her shoulder. The wind cut at her skin like a blade, but she barely felt it, not with her heart beating wild inside her ribs. The black business card sat in her coat pocket, heavy as a stone. When she pushed open the door to her shabby third-floor studio, a deeper cold spilled out to meet her. The heater had been broken since last week, and the landlord still had not bothered to fix it. Elena laid Liam on the bed, then hurried to mix a warm bottle from the newly bought formula. For the first time in 2 days, she watched her son drink until he was full, his blue eyes slowly drifting shut in satisfaction. Tears rolled down Elena's cheeks as she sat there, watching Liam sleep. She had almost let her baby go hungry. She had almost failed completely as a mother. When Liam was settled in the old worn crib, Elena sank into the only chair in the apartment and pulled out the black card. D. Valencia Industries. No job title, no email address, only a phone number and a name that felt like a locked door. She took out her cracked screen phone, opened Google, and typed Valencia Industries Chicago. The results appeared instantly. A massive real estate and investment conglomerate, headquartered downtown, owning dozens of buildings across Chicago. Annual revenue estimated in the hundreds of millions of dollars. Elena swallowed hard, her heart pounding even faster. She tried again, searching D. Valencia, Chicago, but nothing came up. No photos, no biography, not a single article mentioning the man behind that name, as if he did not exist, or as if he had wiped himself clean from the internet on purpose. That unsettled Elena more than anything else. She glanced at the clock. It was close to 11 at night, but she knew Maggie O'Brien in the apartment across the hall would still be awake. The Irish woman, 68 years old, was the only person Elena could truly call a friend in this building. Maggie watched Liam whenever Elena worked the night shift at the packing plant, never taking a single cent. Elena stood, opened her door softly, and knocked on the apartment across the hall. Maggie opened almost at once, silver hair pinned up, pale blue eyes flashing with worry when she saw Elena's face. "Girl, what is it? Come in. It's freezing out there." Elena stepped into Maggie's warm apartment, sat on the old sofa, and told her everything. About the card being declined, about the stranger, about the black business card and the job offer with a salary that sounded impossible. Maggie listened in silence, her brows knitting tighter with every word. "Valencia," she murmured, as if the name tasted bitter on her tongue. "Girl, down here on the South Side, everybody knows that name. They're not good people, not the kind you want to get mixed up with." "What do you know about them?" Elena asked, her voice shaking. "I don't know much. Nobody knows much. And that's the scary part. Men like Valencia. They've got power that makes things disappear. Even people." Maggie closed her hand around Elena's, her voice turning grave. "Be careful, girl. Nobody gives away anything for free. Especially not men like him." On the way back to her apartment, Elena paused at her own door and stared into the dark hallway. Maggie's warning echoed in her mind. Then she looked at Liam, sleeping deeply, his belly full for the first time in days, and the memory of Marcus surged over her like a wave. Marcus Davis, the man she had loved, the man who swore he would stay with her for life. When she told him she was pregnant, something in his eyes changed. The love vanished. All that remained was panic and selfishness. He walked out when she was 5 months along, took every dollar she had saved, and left behind a sloppy note. "I'm not ready for this." She had not seen him since. Not one phone call, not one message asking about his son. Elena had carried everything alone. She gave birth alone. She raised Liam alone. She worked herself to exhaustion just to keep a roof over their heads. And now she stood here, in a freezing apartment, with $23 in her account and a business card from a dangerous man. She could say no. She could keep living the way she was living now, working night shifts at the factory for minimum wage, counting every coin, waking up every day wondering if she would have enough money to buy milk for her baby. Or she could take the risk. Elena looked down at Liam. Her son deserved more than this. He deserved to be full. He deserved a place with heat that worked. He deserved a mother who did not have to go hungry just to afford diapers. She picked up the black card again. D. Valencia. The man with storm-gray eyes and a scar across his eyebrow. The man who made a store owner tremble at the sound of his name. The man who had looked at her with something that felt like understanding. Maggie was right. Nobody gives anything away for free. But Elena had run out of choices. She set the card on the table, lay down beside Liam, and closed her eyes. Tomorrow morning, she would go to Valencia Industries. She would look that man straight in the eye and find out what he really wanted. If it was a trap, she would face it. If it was a real chance, she would take it with both hands. For Liam, for her son, she was willing to step into the devil's den if that was what it took. Monday morning arrived beneath a leaden gray sky, clouds hanging low and heavy, threatening a fresh fall of snow. Elena woke at 5 o'clock, lying still and staring at the cracked ceiling while Liam slept on. She had barely slept at all. Her mind kept circling the image of the man in the black cashmere coat and that mysterious business card that felt like a question with teeth. When the clock crept to 6, she slid quietly out of bed and opened her closet. Inside were only a few worn outfits, most of them frayed or faded. She searched through them and finally pulled out the only thing that still looked decent. A dark blue dress she had bought at a thrift shop 2 years earlier for her interview at the factory. It fit a little loosely now, because she had grown thinner since Liam was born, but at least it had no holes, no stains. She took a quick shower in cold water, since the water heater was broken too. Then she put on the dress and tried to smooth her dark brown hair into something neat. In the mirror, Elena saw a young woman with bruised shadows under her eyes from lack of sleep, and cheeks that had gone slightly hollow from not eating enough. She dabbed on the last of her lipstick, doing her best to look as professional as she could. At 7 in the morning, she knocked on Maggie's door and asked her to watch Liam. Maggie studied her with worry but said nothing, only nodded and gathered Liam into her arms. He was still half asleep, warm and heavy against her shoulder. "Be careful, girl," Maggie whispered as Elena left. The bus ride from the south side to downtown Chicago took 45 minutes. Elena sat in the back row, watching the city change through the window. The dark streets of the south side, littered with trash and tagged with graffiti, slowly gave way to gleaming skyscrapers, luxury storefronts, and men and women striding past in expensive suits. 2 entirely different worlds, separated by less than an hour on a city bus. Elena had lived in Chicago all her life, but she rarely set foot downtown. This was not her world. She did not belong here. When the bus stopped at the nearest station, Elena stepped down and went still. The Valencia Industries building rose before her like a monument to power and money. 40 floors of glass and steel climbed into the gray sky, reflecting the clouds like a giant mirror. The Valencia Industries logo was etched in silver across the front, catching the morning light. Luxury cars lined the curb. Men and women in tailored clothing moved in and out through the revolving doors, each of them looking busy, important. Elena stood there in her old thrift shop dress and felt smaller and more out of place than she ever had in her life. She drew in a deep breath and stepped through the revolving door. The lobby was so vast and polished it made her dizzy. White marble floors shone beneath crystal chandeliers, throwing light back in clean, cold reflections. Perfectly trimmed green plants sat beside towering pillars. A massive abstract painting hung on the wall, surely worth more than Elena's apartment 100 times over. A black granite reception desk stood at the center, where 2 women in elegant uniforms worked. Elena walked up, feeling eyes turning toward her from all around the lobby. She knew she looked wrong here. The old dress, the worn heels of her shoes, the cheap handbag, everything about her screamed the same word: poor. The receptionist looked up, her gaze sweeping Elena from head to toe with open contempt. "How can I help you?" Her voice was cold and distant, the kind of voice reserved for people who were not meant to be here. I have an appointment," Elena said, her voice trembling. She pulled the black business card from her coat pocket and set it on the counter. "With Mr. Valencia." The receptionist glanced at the card, and for one brief moment Elena saw her face change completely. The contempt vanished, replaced by fear, and something that looked a lot like respect. She straightened as if shocked by electricity, hands trembling as she lifted the phone. "1 moment, please." Her voice had transformed into pure politeness, almost obedient. She spoke a few words into the receiver. too low for Elena to catch, then set it down and looked back at her with a tight, nervous smile. Mr. Valencia is expecting you. 40th floor, private elevator to the right. Here is your access card. Elena took the card from her, noticing the receptionist's hands were shaking. She walked toward the elevator, the woman indicated, set apart from the others, its doors gleaming with gold plating. When Elena swiped the card and stepped inside, she realized there was only one button, 40th floor, the top floor of the building. The elevator began to move, smooth and swift. Elena watched the numbers climb on the display. 10, 20, 30. Her heart beat faster with every floor that slipped past. She did not know what was waiting for her up there. She did not know who that man truly was. She only knew there was no turning back now. When the elevator reached the 40th floor with a soft ding, the doors opened, and Elena stepped into a world that felt entirely different. And at the end of the hallway, beyond a clear glass door, she saw him, Dominic Valencia, standing with his back to her, gazing out at the city of Chicago spread below, like a king looking over his kingdom. Dominic Valencia's office was nothing like anything Elena had ever imagined. There were no expensive paintings, no flashy decorations meant to advertise wealth. The room was vast, designed with a minimalism so severe it felt almost austere. White walls, dark oak floors, a massive desk of polished black wood, holding nothing but a laptop and a single desk lamp, 2 black leather chairs facing the desk, and behind it, an entire wall of glass, opening to a sweeping view of Chicago all the way to the horizon. From this height, the other skyscrapers looked like small toy blocks. Lake Michigan glimmered beneath weak sunlight pushing through the clouds. The whole city rested at the feet of the man standing with his back to her. Dominic did not turn when she entered. He stood there with his hands in his pockets, relaxed in posture, yet radiating a crushing kind of power that made it hard for Elena to breathe. He wore a perfectly tailored charcoal gray suit, not a wrinkle anywhere, as if it had been molded to his body. In daylight, he looked nothing like the man from that night at Moretti's. More distant, colder, more dangerous. That night, she had seen a fleeting softness in his eyes when he looked at Liam. Now, there was only steel. Sit. I don't. His voice was not loud, yet it carried across the room like an order. Not an invitation, not a suggestion. An order. Elena swallowed and moved to one of the black leather chairs, sitting carefully. She felt as if she were stepping into the den of a hunting animal, never knowing when it might strike. Dominic finally turned. His gray eyes swept over her, quick and exact, like an airport security scan. Elena had the sick feeling that he could read everything about her in a single glance. The exhaustion, the anxiety, the desperation she had tried to hide. He said nothing. He only walked to the desk and sat in the high-backed chair across from her. When can you start? Elena blinked, not sure she had heard him right. I'm sorry? The job. When can you start? Dominic repeated, his tone as even as if he were asking about the weather. You're not going to interview me? Elena asked, unable to hide her shock. You don't know anything about me. You don't know what education I have, what experience I have, whether I can even do the work. I know enough. Dominic leaned forward, elbows on the desk, eyes fixed on her. I know you went 2 days without eating so you could save money for your baby's formula. I know you walked 6 blocks through the snow instead of calling a taxi because you couldn't afford it. I know you're a single mother working night shifts at a packing plant for wages that aren't enough to live on. And I know you came here today even though you're afraid, even though you don't know who I am, even though every instinct in your body is screaming that this is a mistake. He paused, letting the words sink in. That's everything I need to know. Heat rushed into Elena's face. He had investigated her. Of course he had. A man with this kind of power did nothing without information. She should have been afraid. She should have stood up and walked out immediately. Instead, she felt a flare of anger ignite in her chest. Why? She asked bluntly, her voice harder than she meant it to be. Why did you help me? What do you want from me? Dominic looked at her for a long time, his gray eyes unreadable. Then he stood, turned his back to her again, and stared out through the vast glass wall. When he spoke, his voice was lower, more distant, as if he were talking to himself more than to her. My mother's name was Maria. She was an immigrant from Italy, with nothing but her 2 hands and a little boy. She waited tables 12 hours a day, 7 days a week. There were nights she didn't eat, so I could have breakfast. There were months she couldn't pay the electric bill so I could have school books. Dominic paused, his shoulders tight beneath the expensive fabric of his suit. When I was 6, there was a day she took me to buy groceries. Her card was declined. She had to put a box of cereal back. I cried because I was hungry, and she cried because she couldn't feed me. A stranger stepped forward and paid for us. He didn't leave a name. He didn't ask for anything. He just paid and walked away. He turned to Elena, and for the first time she saw something else in those storm-gray eyes. Not coldness, not danger, Pain. An old pain, buried deep. I never found that man to thank him. My mother died of cancer 18 years ago, before I could give her a better life. And Dominic's voice stayed steady, but there was a small fracture in it. That night at Moretti's, I saw my mother in you. I saw myself in that baby. And I remembered a promise I had forgotten a long time ago. He walked to his desk drawer, took out a white envelope, and set it in front of Elena. $3,000 as an advance. You'll be an assistant to the Director of Human Resources. $4,000 a month, full benefits, and free on-site daycare for your son. You can start tomorrow or next week, your choice. If you don't like the job, you can quit anytime. The advance doesn't need to be paid back. He looked at her, his eyes returning to their earlier chill. I don't want anything from you, Elena. No strings, no conditions. This is a real job, and you'll have to do real work to keep it. That's all. Elena stared at the envelope, then lifted her eyes to the man standing in front of her. $3,000. More than she earned in 2 months at the factory. Money that could pay rent, buy formula for Liam, fix the broken heater, buy a new coat that wasn't torn at the wrists. She knew she should refuse. She knew it sounded too good to be true. She knew men like Dominic Valencia did not help anyone without a reason. But then she thought of Liam, of his hungry crying, of the nights she lay awake, terrified of what she would feed him tomorrow. Elena reached out and took the envelope. I'll start tomorrow, she said, her voice steadier than she expected. And Mr. Valencia, I don't know what kind of man you are. I don't know what you do out there. But if this is a trap, if you're using me, I want you to know one thing. She stood, looking him straight in the eye without blinking. I will do anything to protect my son. Anything. Something flashed across Dominic's face. Surprise. Respect. Elena could not tell, but when he spoke, there was the faintest curve at the corner of his mouth, the first smile she had seen on that cold face. I believe you will, he said. I'll see you tomorrow, Elena. Elena's first day at Valencia Industries began at 8 in the morning. She arrived 15 minutes early, Liam in her arms, her heart racing as she stepped through the revolving doors of the 40-story building. The receptionist from the day before recognized her immediately and offered an overeager smile, pointing her toward the 5th floor, where the company daycare was located. Elena followed the directions, stepping into the elevator with a worry she could not hide. She had been awake all night, turning her decision over and over, asking herself whether she was bringing her son into something dangerous. But when the elevator doors opened on the 5th floor and she saw the daycare, every fear fell away for a moment. The Valencia Industries daycare was unlike anything Elena had ever seen. The room was spacious, flooded with natural light from enormous windows. The floor was covered in soft pastel carpet. Toy shelves stood full and bright. A reading corner held small, cushioned chairs, inviting and sweet. There was a separate area for infants, with spotless white cribs and rocking chairs for mothers who needed to nurse. 3 staff members in pale blue uniforms cared for about 10 children. Each of them wore a warm, gentle smile. Lisa, the daycare manager, welcomed Elena with genuine kindness and smoothly took Liam from her arms. For the first time in her life, Elena left her son somewhere that felt safe. After Liam was settled, Elena was directed up to the 15th floor, where she would be working. Carmen Reyes, the Director of Human Resources, was a Hispanic woman around 55 years old, black hair threaded with silver and pinned neatly at the back of her head. Sharp brown eyes watched from behind black-framed glasses. She wore a burgundy suit cut with quiet precision, and she carried authority like a second skin. But when she saw Elena step in, her gaze softened slightly. Elena Carter, she said, her voice low and firm. I've been briefed about you. Sit down. Elena sat in the chair across from Carmen's desk, feeling as if she were being measured inch by inch. Carmen studied her for a long moment, then nodded, as if she had made a decision in her own mind. You will be my assistant. The job includes managing my calendar, handling email, preparing documents for meetings, and anything else I need. Can you learn quickly? I'll do my best, Elena said. Your best isn't enough here. You have to be able to do it. Carmen leaned forward, lowering her voice. And Elena, there are a few rules you need to know. Unwritten rules, but more important than anything in the employee handbook. Elena swallowed, hearing the weight in Carmen's tone. Don't ask too many questions. Don't be curious. Don't go to the 40th floor unless you're summoned. And never, I mean never, speak to outsiders about what you see or hear here. Do you understand? I understand, Elena said, even though questions were already crowding her mind. Carmen nodded, satisfied. Good. Now go meet your coworkers. The 15th floor office buzzed with about 30 employees working in separate cubicles. Elena was introduced to the people she would be working with. Jessica, a young blonde woman with a bright smile, worked the front desk. David, a a middle-aged man with a carefully trimmed beard, worked in accounting. Michelle, a black woman around 30 with striking emerald earrings, was a senior assistant who had been here for 3 years. They all welcomed Elena warmly, but there was something strange she could not quite name. At lunch, Elena sat with Michelle and Jessica in the employee cafeteria on the 12th floor. The cafeteria was just as polished as the daycare, with a varied menu and prices subsidized so cheaply Elena could hardly believe it. She chose a salad and a sandwich, eating a proper lunch for the first time in months. "So who referred you here?" Jessica asked, her voice curious. "I, Mr. Valencia," Elena said, unsure whether she should hide it. Both Jessica and Michelle went still. They exchanged a quick look that Elena caught, a look loaded with meaning and a thin edge of fear. "Mr. Valencia," Michelle said slowly. "That's interesting. He rarely hires anyone directly." "Tracked. What kind of man is he?" Elena asked, trying to keep her voice casual. Silence settled over the table. Jessica suddenly became very interested in her salad. Michelle looked down at her hands, her expression hard to read. "He's the boss," Michelle finally said. "That's all you need to know. But nobody ever goes up to the 40th floor? Nobody talks about him?" Elena pressed. "Elena." Michelle leaned closer, her voice dropping to nearly a whisper. "There are things here that are better not knowing. This company pays well, the benefits are good, and they treat employees like family. In return, we don't ask too much. We don't get curious. We don't look where we shouldn't. You can do that. You'll be fine. You can't." Michelle did not finish. She only shook her head. The afternoon passed in a flood of paperwork and email. Elena worked hard, learning quickly the way Carmen demanded. But inside her mind, the questions kept spinning. Why was everyone afraid to say Dominic Valencia's name? Why did no one go to the 40th floor? What did this company really do? And the man who had saved her that night, the man with storm gray eyes and a story about an immigrant mother, who was he really? At 5 p.m, Elena went down to the 5th floor to pick up Liam. Her son lay in a white crib, sleeping peacefully, his belly full after an afternoon bottle. Lisa told her Liam had been wonderful, eating well and sleeping soundly. Elena gathered him into her arms, breathed in the familiar sweetness of him, and felt her eyes burn. This was her new life. A steady job, high pay, a son well cared for. Everything was too perfect, and Elena knew better than anyone. Things that perfect always hid something underneath. When she stepped out of the building, holding Liam in the late afternoon light, she did not realize storm-gray eyes were watching her from a window on the 40th floor. Dominic Valencia stood there, silent as shadow, watching the woman and child walk until they disappeared around the corner of the street. Then he turned back to his desk, where Victor waited with a thick file and grim news about the Kowalski family out of Detroit. But that belonged to the other world. For now, he only wanted to make sure she and the baby got home safely. The first month passed faster than Elena expected. She grew used to the rhythm of the work, used to Carmen, and the way her strictness was sharp but fair. Used to lunches with Michelle and Jessica, used to picking up Liam each afternoon from the daycare, greeted by his bright smile. Her life had changed completely. She had moved into a one-bedroom apartment in a safer area, with heat that worked and windows that were not cracked. She had bought new clothes for Liam, warm outfits that fit him properly instead of hand-me-downs from the charity shop. She had even begun eating 3 meals a day, something she had forgotten a long time ago. But there was one thing she could not get used to: the sudden appearances of Dominic Valencia. The first time it happened was in the 2nd week of the 2nd month. Elena was at her desk, focused on a complicated spreadsheet Carmen had assigned her, when she felt a shift in the air. She looked up and saw him standing there, right beside her desk, as if he had stepped out of nowhere. The entire office went silent. Keyboard clicks stopped. Conversations broke off mid-sentence. Everyone lowered their eyes to their work. No one dared look directly at their boss. "How's the work?" Dominic asked, his voice calm, as if he were asking about the weather. "Good," Elena answered, trying to keep her tone steady even as her heart pounded. "I'm learning how to use the new system." "Good," he nodded. "How is Liam?" "I heard the boy had a runny nose last week." Elena blinked, startled. She had mentioned Liam's sniffles to Lisa at the daycare, but she had not expected that information to reach Dominic. "He's fine now. Just a mild cold. There's a private company doctor on the 3rd floor. Next time the boy isn't feeling well, take him down there. Free for employees and their families." Then he turned and walked away, leaving Elena sitting there with a heart in chaos and hundreds of questions spinning in her mind. Meetings like that kept happening. Not often, maybe once or twice a week, but enough for Elena to begin seeing a pattern. Dominic never stayed long, just a few minutes each time. He never spoke about business or anything tied to Valencia Industries. He only asked about her and Liam, about health, about life, about the small, ordinary things of the day. And what shocked Elena most was that he remembered everything. Every tiny detail she had ever mentioned, even in passing. When she said Liam liked the color blue, she found a soft blue teddy bear in her desk drawer the next week. No tag. No explanation. When she mentioned missing the coffee from a small South Side shop she used to visit with her grandmother, a cup from that exact place was waiting on her desk the next morning when she arrived. When she said Liam was starting to teethe and fussed at night, a package of high-end teething toys from Germany appeared in Liam's cubby at daycare. "Have you noticed he likes you?" Michelle asked one day, whispering in the cafeteria. Elena nearly choked on her coffee. "What? No, he's just... I don't know. Checking that I'm doing the job right." Michelle looked at her the way someone does when they know more than they are saying. "Elena, I've worked here 3 years. Mr. Valencia has never come down to the working floors. Never. He has people to do that. But since you got here, he comes to the 15th floor almost every week. Everyone is talking." Elena felt her face heat up. I'm not saying what he wants. I'm saying what I see. And what I see is the most powerful man in Chicago finding every excuse to speak to a woman he met only weeks ago." Michelle leaned closer. "Be careful, Elena. Men like Mr. Valencia, they don't do anything without a purpose." But Elena was not as sure as Michelle thought she should be. She had looked into Dominic's eyes enough times to recognize something buried deep under that cold exterior. Not hunger, not calculation. Loneliness. A loneliness so deep she recognized it, because she had felt it herself. Maybe he was using her. Maybe this was all some careful game, but every time he asked about Liam, and his gaze softened in that rare way, every time he remembered small details that even Elena had nearly forgotten, every time he stood beside her desk with a faint awkwardness, the kind that comes from a man not used to normal conversation, Elena felt her heart loosen just a little, and that frightened her more than anything else. Because Elena knew Dominic Valencia was dangerous. She knew he had secrets. She knew there were dark things behind the doors of the 40th floor, things she was not meant to know. But she was beginning to sense that behind all that darkness, there was a human being trying to reach her in the only way he knew. The question was this: did she have the courage to look deeper into that darkness? The invitation arrived on a Thursday morning, the 3rd week of the 2nd month. Elena was sitting at her desk when an email appeared on her computer screen from an address she had never seen before. No subject line, only one short sentence. 12 noon. My office. Bring Liam. There was no signature. But Elena knew exactly who it was from. She stared at the screen for 5 minutes, unsure what she was supposed to do. This was the first time Dominic had asked her to come up to the 40th floor since the interview, and he wanted her to bring Liam. What did that mean? Should she refuse? But was refusing the boss even a smart option? At 11:45, Elena went down to the 5th floor and picked up Liam from the daycare. Lisa watched her with curious eyes, but she did not ask questions when Elena explained she needed to take Liam for a little while. Elena strapped her son to her chest in the carrier and stepped into the private elevator that led to the 40th floor, her heart beating so hard she could hear it in her ears. When the elevator doors opened, she saw Dominic waiting at the end of the hallway, not inside his office, but right outside the door, as if he had been standing there for a long time. "You came," he said, his voice gentler than she had ever heard it. His storm-gray eyes did not look at Elena. They went straight to Liam, and something unreadable passed through his gaze. "Thank you for saying yes." Elena did not know what to say. She only nodded and followed him into the office. The room had changed since the last time she was there. A soft cream-colored rug had been laid in one corner. On it were a few children's toys and a blue teddy bear. Elena recognized the bear at once. It was the same one that had appeared in her desk drawer weeks earlier. On a small meeting table near the windows, 2 lunches had been set out, along with a warm bottle of milk and a container of baby food. "I didn't know what Liam can eat," Dominic said, looking slightly awkward. "I asked Lisa at the daycare, and she suggested a few things. I hope it's right." Elena took in the careful preparation. The bear on the rug, the strained expression of the most powerful man in Chicago, worried about whether he had chosen the right food for an 8-month-old baby. Something inside her chest softened. "Perfect," she said quietly. "Thank you." Lunch began in an awkward hush. Elena set Liam on the rug, and he crawled straight for the teddy bear and wrapped his arms around it. Dominic sat across from her at the table, but his eyes kept drifting back to Liam, as if he had never watched a child play before. The food was simple Italian, pasta with tomato sauce and garlic bread. Nothing like what Elena had imagined a billionaire would eat. "This is what my mother used to make," Dominic explained when he noticed her surprise. "She didn't have money for fancy food, but she cooked the best pasta I've ever had. I still have the chef make her recipe every week." "You miss your mother," Elena said. It was not a question. It was an observation. "Every day." Dominic nodded, his gaze distant. "She was the only person who ever looked at me and saw a child, not a tool or a threat. When she died, I lost the only person in this world who truly loved me. The blunt honesty startled Elena. She had not expected Dominic Valencia, the man who made Chicago tremble, to speak so openly about his loneliness. Before she could respond, Liam let out a delighted little sound and began crawling toward Dominic. Elena started to rise and scoop her son up, but Dominic lifted a hand to stop her. "Is it all right?" he asked, his voice uncertain in a way that did not seem to belong to him. "If I hold him," Elena nodded, and she watched Dominic Valencia, the most powerful mafia boss in Chicago, lift Liam with the care of someone holding fragile crystal. Liam stared at the stranger with wide blue eyes, then reached up and grabbed the scar on Dominic's eyebrow. Instead of flinching, Dominic laughed. A small, awkward sound. A sound so different from the cold man Elena thought she knew. "He likes my scar," Dominic said, surprised. "Liam likes anything new," Elena replied, unable to stop the smile that rose to her lips. "Especially anything he can grab." Lunch went on in a gentler air. Dominic told her about the classic books he loved, about Dostoevsky and Tolstoy, about nights he sat alone in this office reading because he could not sleep. He pointed toward the piano in the corner, the one Elena had never truly noticed, and said he had learned to play when he was small. He told her his mother had worked an extra 6 months just to pay for his lessons, because she believed music would keep him away from the streets. "She was right," Dominic said, looking down at Liam, who had begun to drift toward sleep in his arms. "Music was the only thing that kept me sane in the hardest years." "Could you play something for me?" Elena asked, and immediately felt embarrassed by her own boldness. "I mean, if you're not busy." Dominic looked at her for a long moment. Then he stood slowly, still holding Liam. He walked to the piano, sat down, and settled Liam on his lap. One arm held the baby close, the other hand lowered to the keys, and then he began to play. It was Chopin, a soft, sorrowful nocturne. The notes flowed like cool water in a summer night. Liam opened his eyes and watched Dominic's fingers move across the keys, completely spellbound. And Elena sat there with tears sliding down her cheeks, not even realizing they had started. She had seen many sides of Dominic Valencia. Coldness, danger, power. But this was the first time she had seen tenderness, and that frightened her more than anything else. That Thursday lunch became a routine. Every week, at exactly 12 noon on Thursday, Elena brought Liam up to the 40th floor, where Dominic had already set out food and toys. They ate together. They talked about books and music, about Liam and the milestones he was reaching. Dominic was still clumsy around children, but he tried, and that effort moved Elena more than perfection ever could. Liam began calling Dominic Dudu, unable to pronounce his name, and every time that lisped little call rang out, Dominic's cold gray eyes lit up in a way Elena had never seen before. She knew she was stepping into dangerous territory. She knew she was growing feelings for a man she had no right to love. But every Thursday, when she watched Dominic play piano for Liam, when she saw the rare smile on his mouth, when she felt the deep loneliness inside him slowly beginning to fill, Elena could not stop her heart, and she did not want to stop it anymore. That night began like any other ordinary night. Elena came home after work. She fed Liam dinner, bathed him, and put him to bed. She sat down on the sofa, intending to review a few documents Carmen had assigned for tomorrow, and that was when she realized she had forgotten an important folder on her desk. Normally, she would have waited until morning, but Carmen needed those documents for the meeting at 8 o'clock, and Elena did not want to disappoint her. Maggie agreed to watch Liam for a little while, and Elena drove the old car she had been seen to buy with her first month's paycheck to the Valencia Industries building. The clock read 11 at night when Elena stepped into the main lobby. The building was almost empty. Only a night security guard sat at the reception desk, dozing. Elena swiped her employee badge and took the elevator up to the 15th floor, quickly grabbed the folder from her desk. As she turned to leave, she glanced out the window and saw that the lights were still on at the 40th floor. Dominic was still working. Elena stood there for a moment, biting her lip, thinking. She had never really had the chance to thank him properly. Not for the job or the salary, but for the Thursday lunches, for the way he treated Liam, for the man he had let her see beneath the cold exterior. Maybe this was the right time. She stepped into the private elevator that led to the 40th floor, swiped her card, and pressed the button. Her heart beat faster than usual. Partly from nerves, partly because she knew what she was about to do might cross a boundary, the one between employee and boss they had both been trying to keep in place. The elevator stopped with a soft ding. The doors opened, and Elena heard screaming. The sound froze her where she stood, her feet refusing to move. It was the scream of a man, full of pain and desperation, echoing from the far end of the hallway. Instinct told her to turn back, press the close button, and run. But another part of her, the part that had lived on the south side long enough to know when to run and when to understand what was happening, pushed her forward. She stepped out of the elevator. She moved down the hallway, her footsteps light as if the thick carpet had stolen her weight. The screaming stopped. In its place came low voices, muffled, indistinct. Light spilled from a room she had never entered, a room across from Dominic's main office. The door was slightly open. Elena knew she should not look. She knew this would change everything, but she could not stop herself. She pressed her eye to the narrow gap and saw hell. The room was bare, empty of furniture except for a metal chair in the center and a sheet of plastic spread across the floor. On that chair, a man was bound tightly, his face twisted by bruises and blood. One eye was swollen shut. His lips were split, blood running down his chin. He was crying. Those desperate sobs of someone who knew he was about to die. And standing in front of him was Dominic. He had taken off his suit jacket. The sleeves of his white shirt were rolled up to his elbows. In his hand was a glossy black pistol fitted with a long suppressor. Victor stood beside him, also holding a gun, his face blank. Two other men, Elena did not recognize, stood in the corner, silent as ghosts. "You sold my information to Kowalski," Dominic said, his voice ice cold. Nothing like the voice he used with her and Liam at the Thursday lunches. "3 of my men died because of you. 3 families lost a father, a husband, a son. Do you have anything to say?" The man on the chair cried harder, trying to speak, but only broken sounds came out. Dominic watched him for a long moment, storm-gray eyes without a trace of mercy. "That's what I thought," he said. Then he raised the gun. Elena wanted to close her eyes, but she could not. She stood there as if hypnotized, watching Dominic Valencia, the man who had played piano for her son, the man who had carefully prepared baby food because he did not know what Liam could eat, squeeze the trigger. The shot was not as loud as she had expected, only a soft puff because of the suppressor. But the result was unmistakable. The man jerked once, then slumped, his head falling to the side, a fresh red bullet hole in the center of his forehead. Elena did not know what sound escaped her. Maybe a sharp breath, maybe a small cry. Whatever it was enough. Dominic turned his head. His gray eyes met her blue eyes through the narrow opening of the door, time locked in place. Elena saw recognition on Dominic's face. She saw his eyes widen for a brief instant. She saw something like pain flash across his cold features. Then he said one word. Only one. But it was enough to snap her out of her paralysis. "Elena." She ran. Elena ran like she had never run in her life. She hurled herself toward the elevator, pressing the button again and again with shaking hands. The doors opened, and she stumbled inside, hit the lobby button, praying the doors would close faster. She heard footsteps pounding in the hallway behind her. She heard her name being called, but the elevator doors slid shut, and she began to descend. She did not stop when she reached the main lobby. She ran past the sleeping guard, burst through the doors, and fled into the night. She ran 3 blocks before she stopped in a dark alley, pressing her back against cold brick, gasping like she might suffocate. Her hands shook so badly she could not even pull her phone from her pocket. Her mind spun with what she had just witnessed. Dominic, the gun, the soft puff, the bullet hole in the man's forehead, the man who had given her hope when she had nothing, the man who had played Chopin for her son, the man she was beginning to love, had just killed someone in front of her. Elena slid down onto the freezing ground, drew her knees to her chest, and cried. She cried from fear, from disappointment, from the shattered ache in her heart that screamed she had known. She had always known there was something dark behind those storm-gray eyes, but she had chosen not to look, and now she could not unsee it. The only question left was this. What would Dominic Valencia do with her now that she knew the truth? Elena did not sleep all night. She sat on the bed with Liam in her arms, his body heavy with peaceful sleep, while her eyes stayed fixed on the apartment door, and her ears strained for the smallest sound in the hallway. She thought about packing up and running immediately, but running where? Back to the south side with $23 in her pocket like before. And if Dominic Valencia truly wanted to find her, was there any place in this world she could hide from him? She had lived on the south side long enough to know that men like him could find anyone they wanted, so she sat there and waited for the inevitable, her heart thudding, each heavy beat like a countdown to whatever life she had left. At 6 a.m, there was a knock, not the violent pounding Elena had imagined, just 3 soft taps, almost polite. She laid Liam down on the bed, tucked the blanket around him, and walked to the door on shaking legs. She did not need the peephole to know who stood outside. She opened it. Dominic Valencia was there, alone, without Victor or any bodyguard. He was still wearing last night's clothes. The white shirt was wrinkled, sleeves still rolled up to the elbows. His face carried deep exhaustion, as if he had not slept either. His storm-gray eyes looked at her with something she could not read. Pain, worry, and something that felt like fear. "I know you saw," he said, his voice low and worn. Elena gripped the doorknob, forcing her voice to hold steady. "Are you going to kill me?" The bluntness of it made Dominic flinch as if she had slapped him. He stood still for a long moment, looking at her with raw distress, then shook his head slowly. "If I wanted you dead, you would have been dead since last night," he said, soft as breath. "I'm not here to hurt you, Elena. I'm here to explain." "Explain what?" "Explain that you shot a man dead right in front of me." Elena's voice rose, part fear, part fury. "I saw what you did, Dominic. I saw you raise a gun and put a bullet in a man's head. How do you explain that?" Dominic drew a deep breath, his shoulders sinking as if under an invisible weight. "Can I come in? I don't want to talk about this in the hallway." Elena knew she should refuse. She knew inviting a killer into the apartment where her son was sleeping was the most insane thing she could do. But there was something in Dominic's eyes, a sincerity she had never seen before, that made her step back and open the door wider. Dominic walked in, his gaze sweeping the small apartment before stopping on the bed where Liam slept. His face softened slightly at the sight of the baby. Then he turned back to Elena, keeping a careful distance, as if afraid she might bolt. "What you saw last night," he began, his voice measured, "was the darkest part of my life, the part I never wanted you to know." "You're mafia," Elena said, not a question. Dominic nodded, not trying to deny it. "The Valencia family has been in Chicago more than 50 years. My father led before me. When he was assassinated 12 years ago, I inherited the position. Valencia Industries is the legitimate face of the empire. But behind it are the things you saw last night." Elena's legs felt weak. She had suspected. She had been warned. But hearing Dominic say it out loud still left her dizzy. "The man last night," she whispered. "His name was Marco Santini. He worked for me 10 years. Dominic's voice hardened. "And he sold my family's confidential information to Kowalski, a rival Detroit family. That information got 3 of my men killed in an ambush last week. 3 men with families, wives and children. They died because Marco betrayed us. So you killed him. That's the law of that world." Dominic held her gaze without flinching. "I am not a good man, Elena. I never told you I was. I've done terrible things. I have killed. I have ordered killings. I have looked into an enemy's eyes and not blinked when I pulled the trigger. That's who I am. That's my life." Tears spilled down Elena's cheeks, no matter how hard she tried to hold them back. "Then why are you telling me? Why didn't you kill me to silence me?" Dominic stepped forward, stopping when he was only a single step away. His gray eyes held hers with an intensity that pinned her in place. "Because I can't," he said, his voice shaking for the first time since she had met him. "I thought about it all night. I tried to convince myself you were a threat, that you knew too much, that I had to do what had to be done, but I couldn't. Because you're the first person who's made me feel alive in 18 years. Because Liam is the first child who's ever said my name without fear. Because when I'm with you, I remember who I wanted to be before this world swallowed me." Elena cried, the tears sliding down her face, and she did not even bother wiping them away. She did not know if she was crying from fear, from disappointment, or from the way her heart was breaking as she realized the man she loved was a killer. "You can leave," Dominic continued, his voice light as air. "Right now, if you want. I won't stop you. I'll give you money, enough for you and Liam to start a new life anywhere you choose. I will make sure no one from my world touches you. You can erase every trace of Valencia from your life and never look back." "And if I stay?" Elena asked, her voice trembling. Dominic was silent for a long time. His storm gray eyes held something so fierce it made it hard to breathe. "If you stay," he said slowly, "I swear to you and Liam that you'll be safe with me. Always. No matter what happens. No matter what this world throws at me. No one will touch you. No one will touch Liam. That is my vow." Elena looked at the man standing in front of her. A killer. A mafia boss. And also the man who had played Chopin for her son. The man who had worried over choosing the right baby food. The man who looked at her like a drowning person. And she was the only thing keeping him afloat. She could leave. She should leave. But when she looked into those storm gray eyes filled with pain, she knew she could not. Dominic left right after their conversation, leaving Elena alone with the wreckage in her mind. He did not force her to answer on the spot. He only said she could call him any time once she had decided. Then he slipped out the door like a shadow. Elena stood there and watched the door close. She looked down at her hands, shaking, and she had no idea what to do next. She did not go to work that day. She called Carmen and said she was sick. Her voice was so hoarse Carmen did not ask questions. Elena sat on the bed with Liam in her arms, watching her son play with the blue teddy bear Dominic had given him. And she thought about everything that had happened since that fateful night at Moretti's. About the man in the black cashmere coat who had stepped out of the shadows and changed her life. About Thursday lunches filled with piano music and rare smiles. About storm gray eyes looking at her as if she were something precious. And about the gun in his hand. About that soft puff. About the bullet hole in the center of a man's forehead. Could both images exist inside the same person? Elena did not know. She only knew she stood at a crossroads, and no matter which road she chose, her life would never be the same again. That evening, after Liam was asleep, Elena sat alone in the dark of her apartment and listed her choices. Leave. Dominic had promised her money. Enough to start over. She could go to another city, change her name, build a new life for herself and Liam. But then what? What would she do? Go back to night shifts at a factory for wages that could not support them. Rent another miserable apartment in another dangerous neighborhood. Watch Liam grow up poor the way she had grown up. She thought about her grandmother, the woman who had raised her after her mother died. Her grandmother had worked herself to the bone, hands rough from doing laundry for other people, back bent from years of folding over a sewing machine. Her grandmother had given Elena everything she had, but that everything still had not been enough to pull Elena free from the spiral of poverty. Her grandmother had died 2 years ago in a cold hospital room, her hand gripping Elena's as she whispered, "I only wish I could have given you more." Elena did not want Liam to grow up the way she had. She did not want her son to know hunger so sharp it steals sleep. She did not want him wearing charity shop clothes, being mocked for being poor, watching his mother cry at night because she did not know how to pay the rent. But staying meant what? Staying meant working for a mafia boss. Staying meant closing her eyes to what happened on the 40th floor. Staying meant accepting that the man she was growing attached to was a killer. Elena thought about Dominic, not Dominic in that torture room with a gun in his hand, but Dominic at the piano, playing Chopin for Liam. Dominic worrying over choosing the right baby food. Dominic talking about his mother with a trembling voice and wet eyes. Dominic standing at her apartment door that morning, not with a threat, but with something that looked like pleading. He was both of those men, the killer and the lonely man, darkness and light. And no matter how afraid she was, Elena could not deny that she still felt a heartbeat under the cold armor. Near midnight, Elena made her decision. She took out her phone and typed a short message. "I'm staying, but I have a condition. Meet me in the office tomorrow." The reply came within 10 seconds. Agreed. The next morning, Elena arrived earlier than usual. She left Liam at the daycare and went straight to the 40th floor. Dominic was waiting in his office, standing by the window, the way he had the first time she came up here. When she walked in, he turned and looked at her with worry in his eyes. "What's your condition?" he asked at once. No circling, no delay. Elena drew a deep breath and met his gaze. "I don't want to know anything about that part of you. I don't want to know what you do on the 40th floor after business hours. I don't want to know who your enemies are, who your allies are, who will be the next man sitting in that chair in that room. I will stay. I will work for you. But your dark world and my life have to stay completely separate. Liam can never know. Never. That's my condition." Dominic was silent for a long moment, his gray eyes never leaving her face. Then he nodded, slowly but firmly. "Agreed," he said. "You will never have to see that part of me again. I promise." And this way, Elena let out a breath, but she knew everything had changed. She no longer saw Dominic as a perfect savior. She saw him as a real human being, with darkness and light, with guilt and pain. She did not know if that was good or bad. She only knew that for the first time, she was seeing Dominic Valencia whole. "This Thursday lunch," Dominic said, his voice gentler. "You're still coming, aren't you?" Elena looked at him, looked into those storm-gray eyes, waiting for her answer as if his life depended on it, and she nodded. "I'll be there." A small smile appeared at Dominic's mouth, the first she had seen since that night. Not a bright smile, only the faintest curve at the corner of his lips. But it was enough for Elena to believe that no matter how insane the world was becoming, her decision was the right one. At least, she hoped it was. 2 months after her decision to stay, Elena realized her life had changed in ways she never could have predicted. Not because of the high salary, or the new apartment, or the stability she had never known before, but because Dominic Valencia was slowly becoming an inseparable part of her daily life. And Liam's Thursday lunch still continued like an unbreakable ritual. Every week, exactly at 12 noon, Elena brought Liam up to the 40th floor, where Dominic had already prepared food and toys. But now, those lunches no longer felt stiff the way they had at first. They talked more easily, they laughed more, and Elena began to see a different Dominic. A Dominic that perhaps no one else in this world ever got to see. He was less cold when he was with her. His storm-gray eyes no longer looked like steel. They softened. They warmed. He began telling her stories from his childhood. About days his mother took him to free movies at the community theater. About the first time he played piano on the old battered instrument at the local church. He also began asking about her. About the grandmother who raised her. About the dreams she once had before life became too hard to dream. "I used to want to be a teacher," Elena told him during one lunch. "To teach children in poor neighborhoods like the one I grew up in. I think if someone had given me a chance, My life could have turned out differently. Dominic looked at her with something deep in his gaze. It's never too late, he said. If you still want it, I can arrange for you to go back to school. Elena shook her head and smiled. Maybe one day. Right now, I just want to focus on Liam. Liam, her son, had become the bridge between them. He was nearly a year old now, babbling his first words, learning to take wobbly little steps. He called Elena Mama, and he called Dominic Dudu, unable to pronounce his name. Every time that lisped little call sounded out, Dominic's gray eyes lit up in a way Elena could not describe, as if the boy were giving him a gift more valuable than anything in the world. Victor, Dominic's right hand, said to Elena once. In one of the rare moments they spoke. I've been with him 20 years. I've never seen him like this. You and the kid changed him. Elena did not know how she had changed Dominic. She only knew she was changing too. The walls she had built around her heart after Marcus left were slowly crumbling. She began to look forward to Thursday lunch, to the sound of piano in that office, to the way Dominic's eyes searched for her the moment he stepped into the room. Then, one Tuesday afternoon, everything changed. Elena was sitting at her desk when her phone rang. Daycare. Her heart clenched as she heard Lisa's panicked voice on the other end. Elena, Liam fell. He hit his head on the corner of a table. His forehead is bleeding pretty badly. We're taking him down to medical. Elena barely remembered how she ran. She only knew that when she reached the medical office on the 3rd floor, Liam was sobbing in the doctor's arms, blood spilling from a cut on his forehead. Elena rushed forward and gathered her son to her chest, tears streaming down her face, her heart pounding out of control at the sight of his small, bloodied face. The cut isn't deep, the doctor tried to reassure her. He'll just need a few stitches and he'll be fine. But Elena did not hear him. All she heard was Liam's crying. All she saw was blood on her baby's forehead. All she felt was the terror of a mother when her child is hurt. Then the medical office door flew open. Dominic rushed in. His suit was rumpled. His tie was loose. His hair was damp with sweat, like he had sprinted down from the 40th floor instead of taking the elevator. His storm-gray eyes swept the room until they found Elena and Liam. How is he? Dominic demanded, breathing hard. Mr. Valencia, the doctor said, clearly stunned by the owner's presence. You're in the middle of a board meeting with Nakamura Industries. They flew in from Tokyo to sign a $200 million deal. Dominic did not look at the doctor. He moved straight to Elena and Liam, his gaze locked only on the sobbing child. I know, he said. Victor is handling them for me. Now let me hold him. Elena, too shaken to argue, let Dominic gently take Liam from her arms. And what happened next stole her breath. Dominic held Liam against his chest, one hand supporting the boy's back, the other stroking his soft hair. Then he began to sing, low and steady, a lullaby in Italian. Elena did not understand the words, but she felt the tenderness in every note. Liam, as if under a spell, slowly stopped crying and lifted his wet blue eyes to Dominic's face. Do, the baby whispered, raising his tiny hand to touch the scar on Dominic's eyebrow. I'm here, Dominic whispered back. I'm here, my son. It's all right. Dudu is here. Endertannel. Elena stood there watching the most powerful man in Chicago hold her child and sing an Italian lullaby, and she felt her heart break, then knit itself back together in a new shape. She remembered what Michelle had told her months earlier, that Dominic Valencia never dropped anything to come down to the working floors. But he had walked out of a $200 million meeting to run here when he heard Liam was hurt. And in that moment, with late afternoon sunlight slipping through the medical office window and falling across the two of them, Dominic and Liam, Elena knew. She loved him. She loved a mafia boss, a killer, a man with a blood-soaked past and an uncertain future. But she also loved the man singing to her son with the song his mother once sang to him. The man who set the whole world aside to come running when Liam needed him. She loved both of those men. And that, perhaps, was the most frightening thing Elena Carter had ever faced in her life. 6 months after stepping into Dominic Valencia's world, Elena had started to believe her life had finally settled. She had a good job, a safe apartment, a healthy son who was growing a little more every day. She had Thursday lunches with the man she loved. Even though she had never spoken the words out loud, she had learned how not to think about Dominic's dark side, how not to think about what happened on the 40th floor after business hours, how not to think about blood and guns and death. She had built a wall inside her mind, a wall that separated her ordinary life from the underworld Dominic belonged to. But on a Friday afternoon near the end of December, that wall collapsed. Elena and Liam came home later than usual because she had stopped to do Christmas shopping. Liam was almost 14 months old now, walking steadily, babbling little short sentences. He clutched a stuffed reindeer Elena had just bought, giggling as she carried him up the stairs to their apartment. But when Elena reached her door, she went still. The apartment door was slightly open. Her heart slammed against her ribs. She had not left it open. She was certain she had locked it that morning before work. She stood there for 1 second, survival instinct screaming in her head. Do not go in. Turn around. Run. Then she thought about the possibility that a thief might still be inside, and she stepped back, tightening her hold on Liam. She pulled out her phone and called Dominic. He answered on the first ring. Elena. What is it? My apartment door is open, she said, her voice shaking. I didn't open it. Someone got into my place. The silence on the line lasted only a second, but to Elena it felt like a lifetime. Then Dominic's voice came through, cold and sharp as a blade. Do not go inside. Get out of the building right now. Victor will be there in 5 minutes. Elena obeyed. She carried Liam back down the stairs and out onto the street. She stood in the bitter December wind, holding her son tight, her heart pounding out of control. Exactly 5 minutes later, a black Escalade pulled up in front of her. Victor stepped out, followed by 3 men in black suits that Elena recognized as Dominic's security. Get in the car, Victor said, his tone leaving no room for argument. Mr. Valencia is on his way. Elena sat in the vehicle with Liam, watching Victor and the guards go into the building. 10 minutes later, they came back out with tense faces, and not long after that, another vehicle pulled in, and Dominic stepped out. Elena had never seen him like this. His storm-gray eyes were no longer simply cold. They were burning with something primal. His jaw was clenched so hard she could see the muscle twitching beneath the skin. He walked to the Escalade and pulled the door open, his gaze sweeping Elena and Liam, fast and precise, as if checking for injuries. Are you two all right? He asked, his voice rough. We're fine, Elena said. We weren't home when they came in. Dominic nodded. Then he turned to Victor. Show her. A for day. Victor took out his phone and handed it to Elena. On the screen was a photo of her apartment. Furniture overturned, clothes ripped and thrown across the floor, Liam's toys crushed, and on the wall, written in red paint like blood, were the words, Valencia cannot protect anyone. Elena felt the blood drain from her face. She looked up at Dominic and saw the rage in his eyes shift into something even more terrifying. Absolute cold. The calculation of a predator already planning what comes next. Kowalski, he said, low as a growl. They crossed the line. Who are the Kowalski? Elena asked, even though she had heard the name before, on the night she watched Dominic kill Marco Santini, a mafia family out of Detroit. They've wanted my territory for a long time, but they're not strong enough to come at me head-on, so they play dirty. Dominic looked at her, his gray eyes darkening. They've been watching you, Elena. They know you matter to me. And they're using you to provoke me. The words made Elena shiver. She held Liam tighter, feeling fear crawl up her spine like a cold snake. She had tried to keep her life separate from Dominic's underworld, but that world had found her anyway. What do I do? She asked, her voice trembling. Dominic stared at her for a long moment. Then he lifted his hand and touched her cheek, lightly. It was the first time he had touched her in a way that felt intimate, and even with fear choking her, Elena felt warmth spread from the place his fingers met her skin. You and Liam are moving into my house, he said. Not as an offer, but as an order. Right now, tonight. Dominic, I can't. You can, and you will. He cut in, his storm-gray eyes holding her with an intensity she could not fight. Your apartment isn't safe anymore. Kowalski knows where you live. They know your routine. If you and Liam had been there instead of out shopping, I don't dare think what could have happened. His voice trembled on the last words, and Elena realized what lived behind the fury. Fear. He was afraid of losing her, afraid of losing Liam. My estate has guards 24 hours a day, Dominic continued. It has the most advanced security system. It has everything you and Liam need. And it has me. He paused, looking straight into her eyes. I will not let anything happen to you. To either of you. That's my promise. Elena looked into those burning gray eyes. She looked at a man who seemed ready to set the whole world on fire to protect her and her son. And she knew she had no choice. Not because she was being forced, because she believed him. Whoever he was, whatever he had done, she believed he would keep his promise to protect her and Liam. All right, she said, her voice soft as breath. We'll go with you. End quote. Dominic let out a breath, the kind of breath she did not think he even realized he had been holding. Then he turned to Victor, and when he spoke, his voice had returned to steel. Call every captain to the estate. Tonight we meet. Kowalski wants war. They'll get war. And in that moment, staring into the hellfire in Dominic Valencia's gray eyes, Elena understood why all of Chicago trembled at the sound of his name. She had seen the gentleman who played piano and sang lullabies to Liam, but now she was seeing the real monster. And that monster was waking up because someone had dared to threaten the people he loved. Dominic Valencia's estate sat in the Gold Coast, one of the wealthiest areas in Chicago. When the black Escalade carrying Elena and Liam rolled through a 10-foot iron gate, With security cameras mounted at every corner, Elena felt as if she were stepping into an entirely different world. A white stone drive curved through a vast garden trimmed to perfection. Bare maple trees in winter formed a natural barrier, shielding the property from outside eyes. And at the end of the drive, the mansion appeared like a small palace. The house was built in a neoclassical style, with towering white stone columns across the front, floor-to-ceiling windows, and a wide balcony that faced Lake Michigan in the distance. Elena counted at least 15 windows on the front alone, and she knew that was only a portion of the massive structure. Everywhere, she caught glimpses of guards. Men in black suits posted at the gate, in the corners of the grounds, on the steps at the main entrance. Victor led her and Liam inside. The entry hall was immense, the ceiling soaring high overhead. A huge crystal chandelier hung in the center, and polished white marble floors reflected the light like water. A double staircase curved upward to the second level, and at the far end of the hall, Elena saw a glossy black grand piano positioned beside a window that looked out onto the garden. The piano looked lonely in the vast room, like a friend waiting for someone to come sit down and play. Miss Carter. Elena turned and saw an older woman approaching. She looked to be around 60 years old. Silver hair pinned neatly back, a face lined with age, but brown eyes still bright and warm. She wore a simple black dress with a white apron, professional but approachable. "I'm Maria," she said, her voice carrying a faint Italian lilt. "The housekeeper here. Mr. Valencia asked me to prepare rooms for you and the little one." "Thank you," Elena said, feeling small and overwhelmed by the luxury surrounding her. Maria guided her down a long hallway, lined with paintings, to the guest wing on the east side of the estate. It was separate from the main part of the house, yet connected by a small staircase. Elena and Liam's room was on the second floor. It was spacious, with a double bed, a brand new baby crib beside the window, and a private bathroom with a tub large enough for 3 people to sit comfortably. "If you need anything, press this button," Maria said, pointing to a small device on the wall. "Either I or one of the staff will come right away. The kitchen is open, 24 hours a day. You can request any meal you want." Elena nodded and laid Liam in the new crib. He had nodded off during the drive, exhausted after a day filled with shock. She watched her son sleep, then turned to Maria with the question that had haunted her for months. "Have you known Mr. Valencia a long time?" Maria smiled, the kind of smile that belongs to memory. "Since he was a child. I worked for his mother, Maria Valencia. She was named Maria too. Maybe that's why we became close." Maria sat in the chair by the window, her gaze drifting into the past. "He was the best-behaved child I ever met. Never cried, never complained, even though life was hard back then." "How hard?" Elena asked, sitting on the edge of the bed. "His mother worked 3 jobs at once, waiting tables in the morning, cleaning offices in the afternoon, then sewing at home late into the night. She barely slept. Dominic was only 6 or 7, but he took care of himself. He cooked for himself. He did his own laundry. Because he didn't want his mother to worry about anything more." Maria let out a slow breath. "I remember a time he was bullied at school because his clothes were old and torn. He didn't tell his mother. He didn't cry. He just came home and studied like always. I only found out because I happened to see bruises on his arm." Elena felt her heart tighten. She pictured a small Dominic, lonely and poor, trying to make himself invisible so he would not become a burden to his mother. "Then his father appeared," Maria continued, her voice dropping. "He was the head of the Valencia family, a powerful, ruthless man. He never acknowledged Dominic while Dominic's mother was alive. But when she died of cancer, he suddenly remembered he had a son." Bitterness edged Maria's voice. "He brought Dominic home and trained him as his heir. And the gentle, obedient boy from before slowly became the man you see today." "You stayed with him through all of that?" Elena asked. "I couldn't leave him." Maria looked at Elena with wet eyes. "He was the child I never had. And no matter what he's become, I still see that lonely boy inside him. The boy who only wanted to be loved." That night, Elena lay in bed and could not sleep. Liam slept deeply in the new crib, belly full after a dinner made by Dominic's private chef. The room was quiet and warm, nothing like the miserable apartment she had lived in before. But her mind was not quiet at all. Then she heard the piano. The sound drifted from somewhere in the house, sorrowful and aching. Elena recognized the piece at once. The same Chopin Dominic played for Liam during their Thursday lunches. She lay there listening, feeling the loneliness inside every note. Maria had said Dominic played piano every night. Was this how he lived with the darkness in his life? How he remembered his mother? His poor childhood? The child he had been before this world swallowed him whole. Elena closed her eyes and let the piano carry her into sleep. And that night, she dreamed of a dark-haired boy sitting alone in a dim room, small hands resting on the keys, playing music that no one was listening to. 2 weeks living in Dominic's estate, Elena had grown used to the piano drifting through the house every night. She would lie in bed, listening to the notes rising from downstairs, and wonder what that man was thinking as he sat alone in the dark. But she never went down to him. She was afraid of crossing a line, afraid of letting him see that she cared more than she should, afraid of stepping deeper into his world. But one night in early January, when Liam fussed from teething and Elena had to get up to make a bottle, she realized she would not be able to fall back asleep. The spacious bedroom suddenly felt stifling, and the piano from downstairs sounded like an invitation she could not resist. Elena hesitated, then slipped on a thin robe and stepped out into the hallway. At night, the mansion was as quiet as an ancient temple. Moonlight spilled through tall windows, laying silver bands across the marble floor. Barefoot, Elena moved down the stairs, following the piano as if it were a thread, until she stood at the doorway of the great sitting room where the instrument waited. Dominic sat there with his back to her, hands moving across the keys like dark butterflies. He had not turned on the lights. Only the moon shone in from the windows, drawing him in black and white, like a painting. The piece he was playing was different from anything Elena had heard before. Sadder, more aching, like the cry of a soul searching for redemption. "I know you're there," Dominic said without turning, his fingers still gliding over the keys. Elena startled, but she did not run. She stepped into the room, walked to the sofa near the piano, and sat down. "I can't sleep. Neither can I." Dominic stopped playing, his hands resting on his thighs. He turned to look at her, storm-gray eyes catching the moonlight. "How is Liam?" "Teething." He cried for a while, then went back to sleep. Elena looked at the piano. "What was that piece? I've never heard it. It doesn't have a name. I wrote it." Dominic turned his gaze back to the keys, his voice lowering. "I wrote it the night my mother died, 18 years ago." Elena fell silent, not knowing what to say. She remembered what Maria had told her about Dominic's mother, the woman who worked 3 jobs to raise her son, the lung cancer that took her away. But hearing Dominic speak of it himself was something else entirely. "She died in the winter," Dominic continued, as if he were speaking more to himself than to her. "Late-stage lung cancer. She hid it from me for 2 years because she didn't want me to worry. When I found out, it was already too late." He paused, drawing in a slow breath. "I was 19. I sat beside her bed through the last night, holding her hand, promising her I would be all right, that she didn't need to worry about me anymore, that I would live a good life." Hasidiv did. "Did you keep that promise?" Elena asked softly. Dominic gave a bitter laugh. "I don't know. I'm rich, powerful. I have everything my mother ever dreamed for me." His eyes lifted to Elena, storm gray, filled with a kind of pain she had never seen before. "But I don't think she would be proud of how I got those things. My father appeared after she died," Dominic went on. "He never acknowledged me while she was alive, but suddenly he wanted me, wanted to train me as his heir. And I, a boy who had just lost his mother, lonely and angry at the world, I agreed." "Do you regret it?" Elena asked. "Every day." Dominic let out a long breath. "But then I look at what I've built, at the people who depend on me, and I know I can't go back. This world doesn't let anyone go back. Once you step in, the only path is forward." He paused, studying her with quiet curiosity. "And you? Have you ever regretted anything?" Elena thought about it for a long time. Then she began to speak, saying words she had never said to anyone. "I regret trusting Marcus," she said, her voice trembling slightly. "He was the first person who made me feel like I mattered after my grandmother died. She was the one who raised me, the only person who loved me through my childhood. When she died 2 years ago, I was like a boat without an anchor. Marcus showed up and I clung to him like a drowning person clings to a life raft." She swallowed. "I didn't see the warning signs. I didn't see the selfishness in his eyes. I only saw what I wanted to see." "He left you when you were pregnant," Dominic said, something hard entering his voice. "5th month. He said he wasn't ready to be a father." Elena's laugh was bitter. "And he took all my savings when he went. $2,300. Everything I had in the world." Her eyes burned. "I gave birth to Liam alone. I raised him alone. And every day I wonder if I'm good enough to be his mother." "You are the best mother I've ever met," Dominic said, his voice firm. Elena looked at him, startled by the raw sincerity. "How do you know?" "Because I see the way you look at Liam, the same way my mother looked at me." Dominic reached out, hesitated for a second, then placed his hand over Elena's. Warmth spread from his palm into her skin, like a small current. "With absolute love, without conditions." His voice softened. "Liam is lucky to have you, and I'm lucky I met you." They sat there in silence, hand in hand, looking out at the window where the moonlight was slowly fading. Then they started talking again, about small things and large ones, about dreams and disappointments, about fear and hope. Dominic told her about nights he lay in a cold apartment listening to his mother cry because she didn't have money to pay the bills. Elena told him about days she went hungry so she could save money for school books. They spoke about the scars in their souls that no one else could see. When Elena checked the clock, it was 3 a.m. "I should go to bed," she said, but she did not want to leave. "You should," Dominic agreed, but he did not release her hand either. At last, Elena stood up, and Dominic rose with her. They faced each other in the dark, only a single step apart, their breaths close enough that Elena could feel the warmth of him. "Thank you for listening," Dominic whispered. "Thank you for sharing," Elena answered. A moment passed, heavy with everything they did not say. Then Elena turned and went up the stairs, feeling his storm-gray eyes following her until she disappeared around the corner of the hall. That night, for the first time since coming to this estate, Elena slept well, and in her dream, there was a man playing the piano. Only this time she was not sitting alone and listening. She sat beside him, placed her hand on the keys, and together they played a nameless song. 2 weeks after the night they talked beside the piano, everything between Elena and Dominic had changed in a way that was subtle, but impossible to deny. They did not speak about that night. They did not mention the secrets they had shared, or the hands that had held in the dark, but something new lived between them now, an invisible thread tying two lonely souls together. It made every glance heavier, every accidental touch more electric. One late January afternoon, when the snow had melted and the winter sun poured pale golden light across the garden behind the estate, Elena took Liam outside to play. He could walk steadily now, nearly 15 months old, toddling and darting across the green lawn with clear, ringing laughter. 2 guards stood at a distance, watching, but Elena had grown so used to their presence, she hardly noticed them anymore. She was sitting on a stone bench beside the rosebed when she heard footsteps behind her. She turned and saw Dominic walking toward her. He was not wearing his usual suit, just a dark blue sweater and khaki pants. He looked younger, softer, less like a mafia boss, and more like an ordinary man. "I thought you'd be out here," he said, sitting beside her on the bench. "Liam likes being outside," Elena replied, watching her son try to chase a butterfly. "He's been stuck inside for weeks because the weather was bad. Today it's sunny, so I brought him out." They sat in silence for a while, watching Liam play. Then Dominic spoke, his voice low and slow, as if he were choosing every word with care. "There's something I want to tell you." Elena turned to him, her heart beating faster even as she tried to control it. "What is it?" Dominic did not look at her. His storm-gray eyes stayed on Liam in the grass. But Elena saw his jaw tightening. She saw his hand clench on his thigh. She saw tension etched into every line of his face. "I have loved you," he said, his voice trembling slightly. "I don't know when it started. Maybe from the first night at Moretti's, when I saw you holding your child and fighting the whole world with nothing in your hands. Maybe from the day you looked me in the eye and asked what I wanted from you, instead of lowering your head like everyone else. Maybe from the first time Liam called me Doo-Doo, and I felt my heart melt." He stopped, drew in a deep breath, then finally turned to look at her. "I'm not good at saying things like this. I'm not good with emotions, but I need you to know. I love you, Elena, with everything I have, even if I know it isn't much." Elena felt tears gather in her eyes. She looked at the man sitting beside her, the most powerful man in Chicago, the man who had killed in front of her, and also the man who had sung to her son in Italian, the man who played piano every night because he could not sleep, the man who had let her see the lonely child inside the monster. "I'm afraid," she said, her voice shaking. "You're the most dangerous person I've ever met. You've done things I can't even imagine. You live in a world I never wanted to step into, and every day I'm with you. I know I'm risking not only my life, but Liam's too." She stopped, tears running down her cheeks. "But I still love you, even though I tried not to. Even though I know this is the craziest thing I've ever done in my life. I still love you." Dominic looked at her, storm-gray eyes burning with something Elena had never seen before. He lifted his hand, slowly and gently, as if he were afraid of frightening her, and placed his palm against her cheek. His thumb brushed the tear sliding down her skin. "I don't deserve you," he whispered. "I know that, but I'm too selfish to let you go." Then he leaned forward and kissed her. The kiss was soft and gentle, light as a butterfly. His lips only brushed hers, more like a question than a demand. Elena closed her eyes and felt the warmth of him. She tasted sandalwood and black coffee. She felt his heart racing under the knit of his sweater. She lifted her hand and placed it against his chest. Not to push him away, but to draw him closer. When they parted, only inches between their faces, Elena opened her eyes and looked into storm-gray eyes that held her as if she were his entire universe. "Doo-Doo. Mama." Liam's call from the lawn made them both turn. The little boy stood there holding a wildflower, cheeks round, smile bright as sun. Dominic laughed, The first laugh Elena had seen that reached all the way into his eyes. He stood, walked to Liam, lifted him up, and spun him in a circle until Liam shrieked with delighted laughter. Elena sat there watching them, tears still wet on her cheeks, but her mouth smiling. She did not know what the future would bring. She did not know what Dominic's dark world would demand of them. She only knew that in this moment, she was happy. And sometimes, that is all that matters. 2 months after the war with the Kowalski family, life in the Valencia estate slowly returned to normal, or at least, normal by their standards. The wound on Dominic's hand had healed, leaving only a new scar to add to the collection of old scars across his body. Liam was nearly 18 months old now, speaking more words, running through the mansion with endless energy. Elena had officially resigned from Valencia Industries at Dominic's request, not because he did not want her to work, but because he wanted her safe, and he wanted her to have time for Liam. Instead, she began taking online courses in early childhood education, reaching back toward an old dream she once believed had died a long time ago. The relationship between Elena and Dominic had grown into something deeper than love. They were not only lovers. They were partners, companions, two halves of a whole. Dominic was still cold to the outside world, still the terrifying mafia boss who made all of Chicago tremble. But with Elena and Liam, he became someone else entirely. He read stories to Liam every night. He played piano each evening with Elena seated beside him. And sometimes, he cooked simple Italian dishes from his mother's recipes. On a Saturday night in early April, when spring had begun to drive winter's chill away, Dominic invited Elena to dinner. Not at a public restaurant, for security reasons, but to a private meal on the estate's rooftop, specially arranged. When Elena stepped up the stairs leading to the rooftop, she stopped breathing. Hundreds of small candles lined the railing, forming a sea of trembling light beneath a star-filled sky. A small round table draped in white linen sat in the center, set with 2 silver place settings and a vase of red roses. Soft music floated from somewhere nearby, classical pieces Elena recognized as Chopin. And standing beside the table, in a perfectly cut black suit, was Dominic. "It's beautiful," Elena whispered, walking to him. "Not as beautiful as you," Dominic said, pulling out her chair. Dinner was an elegant spread of Italian dishes prepared by the private chef, but Elena barely remembered what she ate. She was too focused on the man across from her. On the way, he looked at her like she was the most precious thing on earth. On the way, his hand trembled slightly each time he lifted his wine glass. Dominic Valencia, a man who never shook for anything, was shaking for her. After dessert, when the plates had been cleared and only 2 glasses of red wine remained, Dominic stood and moved to Elena's side. He went down on one knee, and Elena felt her heart stop. "Elena," he began, his voice low and unsteady. "Before I met you, I thought my life was already set. I would live alone, die alone, and no one would cry when I was gone. I accepted that. I built walls around my heart and believed no one could ever get through." He paused and swallowed. "Then you appeared, with blue eyes that looked straight at me without fear, with Liam in your arms and the whole world against you, and you still refused to break. You shattered every wall I built. You showed me who I could be if I had someone worth living for." He pulled a small black velvet box from his jacket pocket and opened it. Inside was a diamond ring, simple but elegant, perfect for Elena. "Are you afraid?" he asked. Storm gray eyes locked on hers. "To become my wife. To tie your life to a man like me." Tears spilled from Elena's eyes, and she did not wipe them away. She looked at the man kneeling in front of her, the man who had pulled her back from the edge of desperation, the man who had given her and Liam a home, the man who loved her son as if he were his own. "I'm afraid," she admitted. "I'm afraid every day. Afraid of your world. Afraid of the danger that lurks. Afraid that one day you won't come back." She reached out and touched his cheek, feeling the ridge of scar beneath her fingers. "But I'm more afraid of living without you. More afraid of Liam growing up without you beside him. More afraid of losing the only man who has ever truly seen me. I want Liam to be my legitimate son," Dominic said, his voice firm. "I want you to be my wife. I want to build a family with you. A real family." Elena drew a deep breath. There was one thing she needed to make clear before she gave him her answer. "I have one condition." "Anything," Dominic said immediately. "Liam." Elena met his gaze. "When he grows up, he cannot know about that part of you. He cannot know about the mafia, about what you do, about the underworld. He must have a normal childhood, normal school. He must grow up believing his father is a successful businessman, not a boss." She paused, her voice steady even as her eyes glistened. "If one day he is grown and wants the truth, that will be his decision. But until then, he must be protected from all of it." Dominic was silent for a long moment, storm gray eyes fixed on her with absolute seriousness. Then he nodded. "Agreed," he said. Liam will have the childhood I never did. He will be protected, loved, and allowed to live as an ordinary child. That is my promise." Elena felt as if the heavy stone pressing on her chest had finally been lifted. She looked at the ring in the velvet box. She looked at the man kneeling in front of her, and she knew her answer. "Yes," she said, her voice trembling with happiness. "Yes, I'll marry you. Yes, I'll be your wife." Dominic slid the ring onto her finger, then rose and kissed her beneath candlelight and stars. The kiss was deep and fierce, full of promises about the future they would build together. When they pulled apart, Dominic held her close and whispered against her ear, "Thank you for giving me a family." Elena smiled, happy tears running down her cheeks. "Thank you for saving me." And beneath Chicago's star-filled night sky, two lonely souls finally found their way home. 3 months after the rooftop proposal, Dominic began the legal process to adopt Liam. It was something he had wanted for a long time. But first there was one problem that had to be dealt with. Marcus Davis, the biological father who had never once shown up in his son's life. Dominic's attorney, a middle-aged man named Robert Henderson with 30 years of experience, found Marcus living in Phoenix, Arizona. He worked at a used car lot, lived in a small apartment with another woman, and had clearly built a brand new life with no trace of Elena or Liam in it. When Robert contacted him about signing away his parental rights, Marcus did not want to meet at first. He thought it was some kind of scheme by Elena to get child support. But when Robert mentioned $50,000 in exchange for signing the papers, Marcus's attitude changed completely. He agreed immediately. He did not ask how Liam was doing. He did not ask why Elena needed his signature. He did not ask who would be adopting his son. He only asked when he would get the money. Elena knew this was how it would go. She had prepared herself for Marcus to say yes for money. But when Robert called to tell her Marcus had signed and was waiting for the transfer, it still felt like a fist to the chest. $50,000. That was her son's worth in the eyes of the man who once told her he loved her. The man who promised he would stay for life. The man who placed his hand on her belly and felt Liam kick for the first time. $50,000 to forget the child he helped create. To erase every responsibility. To live as if Liam had never existed. That night, Elena sat alone in the living room, watching Liam sleep through the baby monitor camera feed. She did not cry, but an ache burned low in her chest. An ache for her son. For the child who would grow up and one day might ask about his biological father. Dominic found her there when he returned from a late meeting. He sat beside her without speaking, only placing a hand on her back and waiting. "He took the money," Elena finally said, her voice raw. "He didn't ask one question about Liam. Didn't ask if he's healthy, if he's happy, if he needs anything. He only asked when the money would hit his account." "He doesn't deserve him," Dominic said, his tone hard. "I know." Elena turned to him, blue eyes full of pain. "But knowing that doesn't make it hurt less. My son isn't worth more than $50,000 to his own father. He'll grow up and one day he'll know that. He'll know his biological father sold him like he was a used car." "No," Dominic said, taking her hand. "Liam will grow up knowing he has a father who loves him without conditions. A father who chose him, not out of duty or obligation, but out of love. And that matters more than any blood tie." 2 months later, they stood in the courtroom of the Chicago family court. Elena wore a simple light blue dress. Dominic wore his familiar black suit. Liam sat in his mother's lap, playing with a small toy car Dominic had bought for him before they came to court. He was nearly 2 years old now, with curly brown hair like Elena's, and bright blue eyes. The judge was a middle-aged woman with silver hair and kind eyes. She reviewed the file and asked a few questions about the reasons for the adoption, about financial capacity, about the home environment. Robert Henderson, their attorney, had prepared everything perfectly. Every document was valid. Every requirement was met. "Mr. Valencia," the judge said, looking at Dominic over her silver-rimmed glasses. "Do you understand that this adoption means you will have full rights and responsibilities as a father to this child?" "Yes, Your Honor, I understand," Dominic replied, his voice steady. "And that is exactly what I want. Evely, do you commit to loving, protecting, and raising this child as your own?" "Your Honor," Dominic said, and Elena saw his voice tremble slightly. "I have loved him as my own long before standing here today. This adoption only makes it official." The judge smiled, warm and sincere. She brought down her gavel and declared, "The court approves the petition for adoption. As of today, Liam Carter officially becomes Liam Valencia, the legal son of Dominic Valencia." Azar. Tears rose in Elena's eyes as she heard those words. She turned to Dominic, and what she saw stole her breath. Dominic Valencia, the most powerful mafia boss in Chicago. The man who did not cry when his father abandoned him, did not cry when his mother died, did not cry in any bloody battle, was crying. Silent tears slid down his cheeks as he looked at Liam, the child who was now officially his son. Do crying," Liam said, lifting a tiny hand to touch Dominic's cheek. "Dudu sad. Vezest." Dominic smiled through the tears, took that small hand, and kissed it. "No, my son," he said, his voice thick. "Daddy isn't sad. Daddy's happy. Happier than I've ever been." Liam Valencia, her son's new name. Their son. Elena reached out and held Dominic's hand, and they stood there. A family. In a cold courtroom that somehow had become the warmest place on earth. 1 month after the adoption was approved, Elena and Dominic held their wedding in the back garden of the Gold Coast estate. Not a lavish wedding with hundreds of guests, the way people might imagine a billionaire's wedding. Just 30 people. The closest ones, the few Dominic trusted most in a world built on betrayal. That morning, Elena woke with the feeling that she was living inside a dream. Maria helped her get ready in a sunlit room, her hands trembling as she pinned small flowers into Elena's brown hair. The wedding dress was simple but elegant, ivory white with delicate lace at the neckline and sleeves, fitting Elena's body as if it had been made just for her. In truth, it had. Dominic had hired the best designer in Chicago, but Elena had asked for a dress that was not too extravagant, because she did not want to look like she was trying to become someone else. "You look so beautiful," Maria said, eyes shining with tears. His mother would be so proud if she were still alive to see today. Elena hugged the woman who had become like a mother to her over these months. "Thank you," she whispered, "for everything." Liam, nearly 2 years old and adorable in a tiny dark blue suit, had been given the job of ring bearer. He did not truly understand what he was doing, but he was thrilled to hold the small pillow with 2 wedding rings tied on top. Maggie, the old neighbor from the south side whom Elena had invited, helped keep Liam under control before the ceremony began. The back garden had been transformed into a small paradise. White chairs lined up in 2 neat rows. A path covered in white rose petals led to a flower arch where Dominic waited. Late afternoon sunlight filtered through the trees, throwing golden ribbons of light that danced across the grass. Classical music drifted softly from a 4-piece band standing in the corner of the garden. When Elena stepped out through the doors to the garden, hands tight around a bouquet of white roses, she saw Dominic at the end of the aisle. He wore his usual black suit, but today he looked different, softer, happier. And when his storm-gray eyes met her blue ones, Elena saw him swallow hard, as if fighting to hold his emotions in. Liam walked in front of her, toddling down the aisle with the ring pillow in his hands, stopping now and then to stare at the petals under his feet. The guests chuckled, and even Victor, the hard-faced man standing beside Dominic as the backup ring keeper, smiled. Elena reached Dominic, and he held out his hand for her. His fingers tightened around hers as if he were afraid she might disappear. "You look beautiful," he whispered, his voice rough. "So do you," she answered, smiling. The ceremony was short, but full of meaning. When it came time for vows, Dominic did not use worn-out words from books or the internet. He looked straight into Elena's eyes and spoke from his own heart. "Elena, before I met you, I didn't know what love was. I thought I didn't deserve to be loved. I thought I wasn't capable of loving anyone. You proved me wrong." He paused, his voice trembling slightly. "I promise to protect you, at any cost, until my last breath. I promise to love Liam as my own son, because in my heart he has been my son for a long time. I promise to give you everything I have, not only money or comfort, but my whole heart, my whole soul, all of who I am. You are my family. You are my home, and I will spend the rest of my life earning the love you've given me." Maria cried openly, unable to stop. Victor, the man who had followed Dominic through countless bloody battles, turned his face away to hide wet eyes. Maggie held Liam close and cried into her handkerchief. Elena cried too as she spoke her vows, happy tears streaming down her cheeks. "Dominic, I came to you with nothing but a child and a broken heart. You gave me everything, a home, a family, a love I never dared to dream of. I promise to love you for everything you are, both light and darkness, both angel and devil. I promise to stand beside you through every storm, and to trust you even when the whole world turns its back. I was no to. You are the man of my life, and I will love you until my heart stops beating." When they exchanged rings, and their first kiss as husband and wife was given, the garden burst into applause. Liam did not understand what was happening, but he saw everyone happy, and he clapped too, shouting, "Mama, Daddy." It made everyone laugh. On their wedding night, after the guests had gone and Liam was asleep in his room with Maria watching over him, Elena and Dominic stood on the balcony of the master bedroom, looking out at the city of Chicago glittering under the night lights. Dominic stood behind her, arms wrapped around her waist, his chin resting on her shoulder. "Do you remember the first night we met?" he asked, his voice low. "At Moretti's," Elena said. "I couldn't buy formula for Liam. Here, you went hungry for 2 days so you could save money for him." Dominic held her tighter. "I saw you standing there, shoulders folded in, tears in your eyes, and I thought of my mother, of the days she went without food so I could eat. Elena turned in his arms, placing both hands on his chest. And you saved me. No. Dominic shook his head and lifted a hand to her cheek. You saved me. You and Liam. You gave me a reason to live, to become better. I have denied. He bent and kissed her gently, then whispered against her lips. You will never be hungry again. Never. I promise. And in her husband's arms, beneath a sky full of stars, Elena believed that promise with her whole heart. 5 years after the wedding, the Valencia estate was filled with children's laughter on a winter morning. Snow covered the back garden in white, and soft flakes drifted down like feathers from the high sky. Elena stood by the living room window, holding 6-month-old Isabella asleep in her arms, looking outside at Dominic as he threw snowballs with his 2 sons. Liam was 6 now, tall and strong, with curly brown hair like his mother, but a steadiness in his eyes that echoed his adoptive father. He was in 1st grade at a prestigious private school, where he was known as the son of a successful businessman, not the son of a mafia boss. Just as Dominic had promised, Liam knew nothing about the dark side of his father's life. He only knew his dad traveled often, worked late, but always showed up for the moments that mattered. Marco, their 2nd son, was 3, with storm gray eyes exactly like Dominic's, and a mischief no one could match. He was his father in miniature, from the way he furrowed his brow when thinking to the rare but radiant smile. Dominic often joked that Marco would be the perfect heir, but Elena knew he never truly wanted that. He wanted his sons to have a normal life, far from the underworld he had spent his whole life trying to escape. Isabella, their youngest, was the newest light in the family. She had black hair like her father and blue eyes like her mother, a perfect blend of them both. Dominic, the man who once made all of Chicago tremble, melted completely whenever his little girl wrapped her tiny hand around his finger. Elena's life had changed just as completely. She was no longer the desperate young woman frozen at a checkout counter with $23 in her account. Now she ran the Valencia Charity Foundation, a nonprofit dedicated to helping single mothers in hard circumstances. The foundation provided food, clothing, job placement support, and housing assistance to hundreds of women each year. Elena had turned her own pain into strength, using it to lift other people up. Dominic had changed too. Over the past 5 years, he had gradually made about 70% of the Valencia family's work legitimate. Real estate, investments, construction, all of it run like ordinary business. What remained, the dark part he could not fully abandon, because of the bindings of the underworld, he kept completely separate from his family. Elena did not ask, and Dominic did not tell. It was their agreement, an agreement that had kept their home peaceful for 5 years. That afternoon, the whole family decided to take a drive. Dominic was at the wheel, Elena beside him, the 3 children in the back seat. Liam was telling Marco about a soccer game at school, and Isabella slept peacefully in her car seat. As they passed through the south side, Dominic suddenly slowed the car. Elena looked out and realized they were driving by Moretti's. The store was still there, still with its worn old sign and windows fogged with condensation. Tony Moretti had paid off his debt long ago and was now one of the food suppliers for the Valencia Charity Foundation. Life was strange that way. Dad, why are we stopping? Liam asked, leaning toward the window to look. Dominic looked at Elena, storm gray eyes full of memory. Then he turned to his son. This is where I met your mother, he said softly. Really? Liam's eyes went wide as he stared at the little grocery store with curiosity. You met Mom here, in this store? Yes, one winter night 6 years ago. Your mother was buying formula for you, and I happened to walk by. Dominic smiled, taking Elena's hand. And I knew right then, she was the woman I wanted to spend my life with. So romantic. Liam wrinkled his nose in a child's way. But why did you meet Mom at a grocery store? In movies, people meet in nicer places. Elena laughed, and tears rose suddenly, even though she did not know why. Life isn't always like the movies, sweetheart. Sometimes the most magical things happen in the most ordinary places. Dominic tightened his hold on her hand, then spoke to Liam, his voice low and full. This isn't only where I met your mother, son. This is where I found my family. They sat in the car for a moment, watching the small grocery store where everything began. Elena thought about the woman she had been 6 years before, a woman trembling at a checkout counter, holding a hungry, crying baby, without a single dollar left. She thought about the journey that had carried her from the bottom of despair to the fullness of happiness she lived in now. She thought about the man beside her, the man who stepped out of the dark to save her, and who, in the end, had been saved by her too. Mom, why are you crying? Marco asked from the back seat. Elena wiped her tears and smiled. I'm not sad, sweetheart. I'm happy. Happy because I have your dad, and you, and Liam, and Isabella. Happy because of our family. Dominic drove on, but before they left the street, he looked one last time in the rearview mirror. Moretti's grew smaller, then disappeared behind the corner, but the memory of that winter night would stay in his heart forever. The night he saw a fierce woman in the middle of despair. The night he remembered a vow he had forgotten long ago. The night his life changed forever. And as the car rolled back toward the estate, where Maria was preparing dinner and a fire burned warm in the hearth, Dominic Valencia, the most powerful mafia boss in Chicago, realized he was the richest man alive. Not because of money, not because of power, but because he had a family who loved him for who he truly was, not for what he owned. Sometimes an angel appears in the shape of a devil, and sometimes salvation comes from where we least expect it. But more than anything, sometimes one small moment of kindness can change an entire life. Elena and Dominic's story is proof of that. My dear friends, today's story brings us many precious lessons about life. Sometimes we fall to the very bottom and believe there is no way out. But remember that even in the deepest darkness, a single spark can appear. A small act of kindness can change someone's entire life. And true love does not care about wealth or poverty, does not care about the past. It only asks that two hearts in harmony find each other. How did this story make you feel? In real life, have you ever met someone who changed your life? Or have you ever been the person who brought change to someone else? We would truly love to hear your deepest thoughts in the comments below. If this story touched your heart, please subscribe to the channel, tap like, and share the video so we can bring you more moving stories every day. Your support is the greatest motivation for us to keep creating. Wishing everyone watching this video good health, a joyful life, and days filled with love. Thank you for being with us. Goodbye for now, and we will see you in the next video.